In this presentation, we're going to put it all together. This is going to be the ultimate check for learning. We're going to take a case study and walk through each variable, looking at how we can utilize everything we've learned to this point. The objectives of this presentation are going to be for you to be able to identify critical factors that influence program design. We want to develop a microcycle based on a proposed case study, and then develop a detailed day of programming based on the proposed microcycle. Section 1. We're going to do a case study of a soccer player, for those of us overseas, a football player, and we're going to go through who this person is. First thing is the athlete's information. How old are they? We can see that this particular athlete is 21 years old, 6 feet tall, and 165 pounds. Important notes are that he's a professional football player. He plays in the MLS, he's a starter, and his position is he's a center midfielder. When we think about taking in the medical information, we want to have a complete understanding of what his injury history is. This is going to be very important. As we've mentioned before, injury history is going to be the #1 predictor of potential injury. So it's very important that we gather all this information. When we think about his orthopedic background, his status right now is that there are no pains and there are no restrictions. However, he does have a history of a right hamstring strain and a right ankle sprain. Medical conditions are none, and there are no other things that we have to worry about. Testing. Again, we will have executed all of the appropriate tests to give us all the information that we're going to need to build out his program. Starting from the top in terms of movement quality, when we think about his movement screen, he scored a 15 out of 21. This is good because it means that he falls outside of the range of that 14 or lower that we're going to keep our eye out for. However, he still has his priorities. When we think about his active straight leg raise, we can see that there's an asymmetry here from right to left, something that we're definitely going to have to account for in our program design. Also, he scored a 2 on his trunk stability push-up. So when we think about his core stability and how it functions from the lower body down, these are things that we want to be able to target utilizing the corrective strategies through our movement screen. Following his strength and power testing, we see that for his particular position, his strength is above average, but his power is average. This is something that we may want to pay attention to when we think about rounding out his strength and power design program. In terms of speed, his change of direction is above average and is symmetrical. His reactive agility is above average and symmetrical. However, his acceleration is average and his absolute speed is below average. Now that we're past medical, let's look at his testing results. Again, starting with movement quality, we've performed our movement screen. And here we can see he's a 15 out of 21. This is good because he falls outside of that red flag zone, that 14 and below. So we understand that we can focus in training on helping to correct some of the imbalances that we've discovered during the movement screen. And in this case, we see that his priority is going to be the active straight leg raise. Not only is it going to be a priority because it's the top one in the hierarchy, but here we see that there's an asymmetry from right to left. That is going to be our focus in terms of corrective strategies based on his movement screen results. When we move to his strength and power deficits, we see here that he presents a large deficit. If we recall, this large deficit means that we're going to want to focus on plyometrics and speed strength. We want to heighten his ability to use the stretch reflex to contribute to his movements on the field. When we think about speed, we can see that his change of direction is above average and symmetrical. His reactive ability is above average and symmetrical. However, his acceleration is just average and his absolute speed is below average. So now, in terms of the movement skills that we want to help develop, we know that absolute speed is going to be the focus. So just with this information, just from this testing, we understand from a corrective standpoint where we need to be, from a weight room resistance training standpoint where we need to be, and from a movement skill standpoint where we can begin. In terms of his energy system development, when we continue testing, we see that his aerobic capacities are above average and his anaerobic capacities are also above average. When we look at behavior and motivation, when we look at mindset, he's got very good motivational orientation. He's highly self-determined. He's a hardworking athlete that enjoys the challenge of getting better, and his habits and behaviors on and off the field are aligned to that of a professional. Of course, this is just going to help aid us in being able to help him achieve his goals, reinforcing that our focus can be completely on what he needs to do in the weight room while just continuing to help him reaffirm the habits he's already developed. His goals. His training goals are to improve his overall speed. He also wants to improve his overall strength and power. So again, what he perceives of himself falls right in line with what we've identified during our testing, which is exactly where we want to be. Clearly, his history of hamstring pulls and his ankle injuries are giving him some preoccupation in what he's doing. So he wants to make sure that a focus is going to be reducing his risk of further hamstring and ankle injuries. On-field goals, to improve his burst to the ball, improve the ability to close or separate from an opponent, and an improved ability to win physical one-on-ones. After we have a profile of the athlete, after we have an in-depth understanding of what his mindset is, what his movement skills are, what his needs are, and what his goals are, we then have to take that information and apply it to our calendar. Again, it's great to have all of this information, but we've only got a certain period of time that we're going to be able to train in. We have to take a strong account of what the athlete training time is going to be. What time of the year are they in? How much time do they have to train with you? How many days per week are they going to train with you? In this particular case, we understand that this time of the year is going to be in the off season. His total training length to be able to stay with us is going to be about 4 weeks, and the amount of times per week that he can train are going to be 3 days per week. He only gets a single session a day, and that time allotted to that single session is going to be 90 minutes. So now that we have this information, we can start to build all of the other results that we've gotten into this 90-minute session that we have 3 times a week. Section 2, let's look at the microcycle. Knowing our goals, the training emphasis is going to be on both injury prevention and enhancing performance. In terms of injury prevention, it's going to be based on previous injury and FMS scores that will be focused on symmetry during ankle dorsiflexion and straight leg hip flexion. Overall hip and trunk stability will be an emphasis to ensure that the hamstrings are not overworked during movement. In terms of performance, the on-field performance is going to be directed at increasing his absolute speed. So again, we're going to have a linear speed emphasis in terms of movement skills, with the focus on that linear speed being on the absolute speed component. Again, after presenting that large deficit, we're going to focus on his development of speed strength, utilizing different power modalities and plyometrics. When we look at our microcycle, we're looking at that first week of the 4 weeks that he's going to be with us. Again, he's presented that he's got 3 separate training days. So we understand that we can break up those 3 separate training days to have the 3 separate emphases that we want to look at. 2 linear speed days, since we know that the linear speed is going to be his focus, with a multi-directional day to provide some balance. The first day is going to be dedicated to absolute speed. We want to attack this the first day of the week. We want to make sure that we're working on absolute speed when he's at his freshest. We're going to break up that training week by placing our multi-directional day on day 2. And then on the last day, we'll focus on his acceleration. So if we start to look at that first day, that linear speed day, we're going to look at all of our components: pillar prep, movement prep, plyos, movement skills, medicine ball, strength and power, and ESD. One thing that you can see here is that they all have that same linear speed emphasis. They're all going to be executed in a linear fashion. So with pillar prep, we're going to focus on flexion and extension, and then everything else that we see there, from movement prep all the way down to strength and power, it's going to have that linear emphasis. On day 2, multi-direction, we're going to follow that same strategy. Knowing that this is a multi-directional day, our components are going to have a multi-directional emphasis. So for pillar prep, we're going to have that rotational emphasis. For movement prep, it's going to be mixed. Plyos, lateral horizontal. Movement skills, shuffle and cutting. Medicine ball, rotational. And then again, strength and power are going to have our upper body pushing and pulling. So when we think about what directions we want to move in, when we think about the strategy, it's going to mirror what the movement skill demand is. Lastly, on our day 3, back to linear speed, it's going to look a lot like day 1, except now we're going to have that acceleration emphasis. So everything that you see on day 3 is going to look just like on day 1, except when we get to movement skills, the movement skills emphasis is going to be on acceleration, since this is an acceleration day, as opposed to the absolute speed emphasis that we saw on day 1. Section 3, the continued case study, but now we're going to take a deeper look at our day 1 absolute speed day. If we're looking at this absolute speed day, it's going to be designed and comprised of our 7 main components. The very first component is going to be pillar preparation. As we can see here, this pillar preparation session is going to be designed based on the FMS results that we got. We're also going to take the needs of absolute speed and have them also be the drivers of what we select. Therefore, in our massage section, our stretch section, and our activate section, the exercises that we're choosing are going to be based on the FMS results and the needs of absolute speed on this particular day. So we can see that for this athlete, massaging the quadriceps, hamstrings, and calf complex are going to both be necessary to absolute speed and answer some of the FMS needs. The same exercises chosen in both the stretch and activate sections are going to follow this same thought process. So we can see that this half-kneeling quad stretch, focusing on ankle mobility in the stretch section, and then also pillar bridging and active straight leg lowering in the activate section are going to be the most beneficial exercises for this particular athlete to gain success on this absolute speed day. This general thought process, knowing the movement, knowing the execution of the movement, and what we're going to need to prepare for the highest level of success in that movement is what we're going to utilize in all of the components that will follow. So for movement preparation, we understand that the movements chosen are going to have a linear emphasis because we're executing an absolute speed day. The 4 components of movement prep: hip activation, dynamic stretching, movement integration, and neural activation will follow this thought process, with all of them having a linear emphasis. Aside from just having a linear emphasis, we want there to be a correlation to absolute speed. Understanding that acceleration and absolute speed are different, just because it's a linear speed day doesn't mean that you would choose general linear speed movements. Again, we're going to take this a bit further, choosing movements that are going to directly correlate to absolute speed. So that we could see in hip activation, we're going to have a bent knee linear walk and a straight leg lateral walk, understanding that those two are going to be very important for absolute speed. The dynamic stretches that we've chosen, the inverted hamstring stretch, the knee hug, are also going to have direct correlations to absolute speed success. The movement integration with our pop, float, skip is going to have a direct correlation to absolute speed success, along with the 2-inch run in place in our neural activation section. The key takeaway here is understanding what it is you want to achieve on that particular day, and then what you're going to need to do in preparing the body to demonstrate the highest level of execution in order to achieve success on that particular day. As we move forward and we move towards our plyometrics and movement skills section, we're going to use this same thought process. What movement emphasis, what direction emphasis, what initiation emphasis, and what movement examples are going to be necessary to achieve success in absolute speed if we wanted to utilize plyometrics to prepare ourselves for that session. So having that linear vertical and linear horizontal emphasis is going to be important. The choice of utilizing a hop versus a bound or a jump is also going to be very telling, understanding that absolute speed is going to have a higher elastic quality that we want to help develop, and there's going to be a higher single leg involvement that we want to develop. In our movement skills, the wall drills, step over drills, and free sprints that we choose directly correlate to absolute speed success. So our figure 4 holds, our ankle, shin, and knee runs, and then our free sprints of greater than 40 yards are all going to work on that absolute speed mechanic. The figure 4 holds directly correlate to the positions that we're going to need to achieve in absolute speed. The ankle, shin, and knee runs, again, are going to prepare that cyclic-like action, and then making sure that our free sprints are greater than 40 yards are going to actually allow us to get into the positions that we're going to need to refine. If we were choosing to do medicine ball work, coupling it with plyos, we would focus on how those particular movements would correlate to absolute speed. Again, what are the qualities that we need to refine? In this particular case, understanding that we're going to need that high elastic quality, as I mentioned before in plyometrics, we can use that here as we see in the initiation emphasis being continuous and the ball emphasis being a reactive ball, which is going to demand a higher reactive response from this person. As we transition to strength and power, we can see that our split selection is going to be a lower body push, and that in the power section, our Kaiser power squat is going to, again, focus on a high-speed reactive quality that we want to develop. In our strength block, our primary exercise is going to be single leg in nature. And in our circuit block, we could see that we continue to focus on that reactive quality with our alternating split jumps and our lateral bounds following our strength movements. In terms of energy system development, again, we understand that a strength endurance quality would need to be developed, understanding that this person is going to run over 50 yards if we're working on absolute speed. So in our energy system section, we're going to focus on speed endurance. Again, wanting to make sure that we refine the absolute speed mechanics, we're going to have a distance of 50 yards or greater for this person to execute. By doing 3 sets of 6 and starting every minute, that will focus on helping to develop that speed endurance quality. And for regen, we're going to focus on the same muscle groups that we just used in the session. If you recall to pillar prep, regen has the same subcomponents as our pillar preparation session. Massage, stretch, and in this particular case, we're going to add in hydrotherapy or some type of compression therapy like the Normatec. Massage to help with tissue quality and stretching to help with restoring balance after a rigorous session is going to be very, very important. Utilizing the same muscle groups that we use to prepare ourselves, we're going to make sure that we initiate the recovery for those same ones as well. Check for learning. Create a program for the remaining 2 days of training with considerations for all training components. Use the previous slides as a template for programming or utilize your own template.